Welcome to Yoga Truth. This is our second episode, and tonight we'll be discussing positive thinking and thoughts that benefit you. And I am Bethany Vaughn. I'm your host, and I'm joined tonight by Vanessa Beckham and Liz Connolly and Jamila Bellew and Victoria Telichko. Welcome, ladies.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you.
So, in our first episode, we discussed anxiety and how to deal with it. And now in our second episode, we're going to take it up into a more positive direction, because one of the things that I really noticed when I first started practicing yoga and then ongoing, I would always run into people and they would constantly be talking about all of the things they were doing that they were getting better, all of the things that were wrong with them, all of the healing they still needed to do. And granted, we're all works in progress, but we need to take some time also to really talk about the things that are positive and that benefit us. And we're not in this constant holding pattern of negativity, sadness, constant working on our minds where we're upset all the time. That is just one, of the aspects of doing this kind of work. So I wanted to really kick off this episode with positivity, because it is the whole reason that a lot of people also do yoga, is so that they can feel better, so that things are better, so that the direction we take our lives is in a positive direction. So I wanted to ask you all, what was the type of conditioning you had growing up that may be different than positive thinking? What kind of conditioning?
For me, it was fear. Yeah, I grew up with, so I grew up through a lot of shame, which also resulted in fear and anxiety, which was conditioning that yoga has helped me work through to make me feel more confident in who I am, because I am who I am. Like, I can't hide who I am. So yoga has helped me with that. But that mine was definitely fear, just fear of life, of everything, just fearful, anxious of everything.
So conditioned in a way through daily life, and that everyone acts and talks, especially in family. Family, regardless of whether they're even saying do this and do that, they're typically behaving in a way that we mirror. We pick up on it and we take that as the way our life is supposed to be. We assume also, interestingly, that it's correct. So if you're taught to be fearful or shameful, then that is how you view the world. So that's an interesting, thing. I think that many of us can probably share in that a bit. I certainly can, with the shame for sure. Does anyone else relate to that?
I don't know about the shame necessarily, but I did grow up with the fear. It touched every part of my life in some way, and that negativity of worrying about what was happening or going to happen next, not knowing. So thinking about all the aspects of what could happen, and all the negative around, so you could be prepared, or you thought you were prepared, for what could happen. And that kind of steals your peace. And it starts this perpetual motion of negative thinking and not feeling enough or prepared for what you need to do in your life.
And I think some of that stems also from getting this impression that you're not ever going to be good enough. So you better just keep trying to be prepared for what's coming your way. And then constantly, even when you meet with success, finding the negativity in it. So
Yeah, I can totally relate to Vanessa, like 100%. And that was on my mind. The fear of future and something bad that will for sure happen. So there was no question if it's going to happen. It will happen, and you have to be prepared. Prepared in a way, don't be too happy, don't be too satisfied. You know what I mean? Don't get relaxed, don't
Yes.
get too joyful, because the time will come and it's going to be harder, if you like to go from here to fall, from happiness to like complete dark. So a- absolute fear, and then also the fear of like, and that steals the celebration away from you totally. So you don't celebrate anything, you don't celebrate your achievements, you don't celebrate life, you living in preparation for something really bad. So that's already, and it's tragic in a way, because day after day, your life goes on, and you're still waiting for something really bad happen. So whatever you do, it doesn't matter, nothing matters, because it will be destroyed anyway.
Right. It's inevitable that it's going to be destroyed or something bad is going to happen. So why would you waste your time, working in positive direction, thinking that you've gotten anywhere, because it's just going to be taken away anyway. And I think a lot of that comes from, for sure, thought processes of, when people have gone through really tragic things like war, or any type of loss, you know, you kind of can understand why that would get perpetuated, because I think a lot of times people feel foolish or shameful that they thought it was going to be one way and then things went another way. And so that's the proof that they never should have been happy in the first place, you know, as though we have any control as individuals over what collectively happens, but we definitely take on that sadness and that negativity as individuals, and oftentimes in families, in cultures. It just extends and extends, and you can find that there's this mentality of don't ever get too high because you're going to come crashing down. And it's just easier, people will say, to just not get too excited, because then, like you're saying, Victoria, then the loss is not so bad.
Yeah. And yeah, yeah, I just want to add one small thing. It's in our culture. We survived World War I and II, and the second one was horrible because over 50 million people died, and it's in our genes to be prepared for bad, for hunger, for war, for really bad times. And it happened not so many years ago. My grandparents went to that war, so you hear the stories, you hear like first hand stories. So it's in our culture, it's in our genes, that sadness and that suffering, and that trauma. It's a huge trauma.
It becomes a way of life. And then, interestingly, on that note, it's a betrayal emotionally if you don't follow along with that, or you want happiness and positivity for yourself. So I really did want to talk about this in this light, because being positive isn't easy, and it isn't something that is just I'm happy, or that moment was happy. It's a way of being that you have to practice. Liz, what kind of conditioning did you experience? And I'm not trying to be too personal, obviously. I just want, kind of generally speaking.
Right. So, I mean, definitely, um, always trying to be the people pleaser, but really, never wanting to disappoint, and still that way. But I've found and learned through yoga to not step into somebody else's energy. that I can have my own energy and let my light shine without anyone else casting a shadow on it. And so it took me, till midlife to figure that out, but I'm glad I did, and then I can share that with others.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's any surprise actually that all of us have some life experience. Okay, we're not gonna say that we're older, okay, because we're not, but we're gonna say that we have some life experience. And if you ever look up when you're doing all of this work and the psychology of how we work, and also specifically women, it's very common for women in their 40s and 50s to be coming to these realizations at this age. It actually takes that much life experience before we actually realize what's going on and that we maybe want something different for ourselves. So I don't think that that is even remotely uncommon, but there's this misconception that we're supposed to have everything figured out by the time we're, at least 26. And, the late bloomers are like 30, 31, societally speaking. And it's just all wrong as far as that is concerned. That is not when we come into our own. And when I say that, I mean like coming into your own mind. This happens in, late 30s. It starts happening if you're lucky. And then, by the time you're in your 50s, hopefully, you're starting to really, really like yourself and work with who you are.
And for me, that was a new concept, to look for that inner strength instead of looking for someone to rely upon, a friend or someone in my network, a shoulder to cry on, to really find my own inner strength and that positive thinking, by coming to the mat and practicing. And it is a practice because, no two practices are the same, right? And there were days I wanted to be there and days I didn't, but I always went in one person and came out another, either way. And so, I think just the more I practice, I find new things all the time, and so working through the challenges and finding the positivity and just paying more attention to my own thoughts and not dismissing them, really thinking about what are my thoughts, why are they there, and looking to be pleasantly surprised rather than, as Vanessa said, let my thoughts carry away with me about all the things that could go awry, but rather say, well, maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. And you know what? Sometimes I am.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Like, I feel the same exact way when I come to the mat. I kind of look at it as I don't have to pretend to be anyone. I could just be me. And that's helped me carry that away from the mat in everyday life. So I love what you said about that. It resonates with me as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I would say definitely. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and we were talking about, you have more life experiences, which is wonderful, right? Some are great and some are not so great. But coming to that mat and realizing, hey, this is just about me. This is not a performance. I think I had said something about that a while back. I was not there to perform for anyone. This was just for me, and it's my practice. I love that. I think that just realizing you're accepting yourself where you are at that moment too. Maybe it was a great practice. Maybe you had a great day, and everything just came easily. But maybe it was a really tough day, and you have to realize that that's okay too. That's the way it's supposed to be for whatever the reason on that at the moment.
Because the mat shows you, when you're on your mat, it shows you what's up, what's actually happening. Some days feel great. Other days don't. A lot of them are in between. And what we'll notice is that our mind kind of runs away with us, telling us that we should be thinking positively, even when we don't. And I love what Liz was talking about, where she said, I started listening to myself and I didn't need someone else's shoulder to cry on. And listen, it's great to have friends and you need people in your life, but you have to be your own advocate for your happiness and your comfort. And you get this body in this lifetime and this mind, and you have to live in it. And so why not, keep making improvements and also really just appreciate what you do have. We can be so critical, and we'll get into a little bit of that, because that's one of the culprits of stealing our happiness, is these thoughts that we think are relatively harmless and also think that they're true, that we should be having them. Example, I ate a piece of cake, and you're like, I really loved it. But meanwhile, you're also telling yourself that you really, really don't like yourself at all because it had this many calories and you shouldn't have done that and you're not going to look blah, blah. And that's just one of the things. But women in particular are very hard on themselves all of the time. Even when you're actually happy with yourself, we will find ways to break ourselves down. And that doesn't actually come from within the individual. That is taught. That is taught. And when Liz said, I started listening to myself, to get back to that point, when did you all start to hear and listen to your own voice? Because I didn't listen to mine for a long time. I had, not like other people in my head, but actually other messaging from people that I had to listen to, telling me when I was growing up how things were supposed to be. And so I dedicated a lot of my time and energy to those people. They'll like this house. She'll like this outfit. That's the way my hair should be. This will work. I should get that job. Do you know what I'm talking about? This not listening to
Absolutely.
I feel like it's a constant struggle for me. So I feel like this process started where I started listening to myself several years ago. I got better through yoga teacher training with you, and I continue to get better at listening to myself. Because the reality is I've been on earth for 30 something years, almost 40 years. And through those years, I can't erase everything in one day, right? Sometimes stuff pops up. You're like, that little voice that from 5 years old, it just, popped up. It's still there of what somebody may have told me, and you don't think about it. So I say it's, for me, it's a constant. I'm still working on it. I don't know about you all, but I get stronger every day. And I'll also tell you, this past year, the pandemic, spending a lot of time by myself and having to really find my self-practice, my self-yoga practice, which was not, a hard power practice most of the time. I actually probably spent a lot more time in a restorative practice this year. I felt like I really was getting better at tapping into listening to my true self of what I truly want and what I truly need. So for me, it's a process. I'm getting better every day, but I may not be quite there.
It is so interesting when Vanessa first said that, I'm not performing and it's just my practice and all that. And then Jamila mentioned about the pandemic. So that's what happened within the last year for me. I would usually practice in the group, right? And it would be like a hardcore practice for me. It wasn't really my personal practice. I don't think so. It was always a performance for myself. I would perform in front of myself to prove something to myself. So the past year I would practice at home, and like Jamila said, I could never do the hardcore by myself, and right. So a lot of times I would be not stuck, but like in the pose, like lying, on my back, or like long in the pose, breathing. And that's more restorative, but it's more like going inward, really. And that's when I started connecting my breath to movement, like really trying to synchronize, throughout the practice, which is hard. I would lose it sometimes, but and it takes a lot of focus, right? And it's going inward. Once you start focusing on your breath and movement, you just disconnect from anything else and you focus on yourself. So you go inward. So that helped a lot. So the pandemic situation helped a lot. I didn't feel, I I stopped fearing like what's gonna happen if I lose, this teacher or this practice or this facility. So it was like, okay, I have everything I need. That it's fine. It's not a hardcore or it's not a hot, room or something, but it doesn't matter because it gave you something else. It's a different practice, and I'm happy and I'm so much peaceful, and I listen to myself so much better. Plus, Bethany and Jamila also mentioned, the teacher training gave a lot. It was like a opening a door, and then after that, there is no way you can shut that door. So I remember your words when you said, if you feel something, it's real. It's not like you're making it up. I'm talking about traumas and the negative thinking, going from that. And especially when you practice, I would go back, and I would think and rethink. And I think yoga brings that up, all like it's like a kind of detox. So it brings up all the thoughts, and everything. So, and I think it helped a lot. Like, okay, I feel that way. It's valid. It's me. I feel that way. It happened to me. It's valid. It's there. So, and then it helps the positive thinking because you stop devaluating yourself. You stop like ignoring yourself. You stop like, zeroing out yourself. You're like, okay, I can go from there, even though I had this, negative experience or trauma or anything. It's fine. It's part of me. I just, move on and I can build up based on that as well.
People will work towards contentment, but the key in contentment is to relax into it. This is the other thing that I wanted to say. We don't have to get rid of anything that we are. We need to include every aspect of ourselves. So if you've experienced something traumatic or tragic, etc., or many of those things, we think, I have to rid myself of this in order to move forward in a positive way. How can I possibly be positive having had all of this negative experience? When in actuality, each moment changes, and that was, or those were those moments, and they were not good. And these are other moments. So that gets a little bit interesting in the sense that there's so much propaganda out there to rid yourself of things, to let go of things. Yoga is not this way. Yoga is inclusive. It's inclusive of everyone and everything across all religions, all people, every culture you could think of, every single thing. Yoga is oneness. It's about everybody and everything. And that includes everything you came with. That's totally cool with yoga. Like, there isn't another alternative. How would you get rid of it anyway?
So I think the conflict is, even if you don't do yoga, you know nothing about it, there is no way to get rid of that or like disconnect it from yourself. And that's what I've been struggling for many, many years until I started practicing yoga. And again, like we all said, listening to myself. But the turning point for me was like forgiving myself, like accepting it. Like, okay, that's me. It happened to me, but that's okay. It's not like it defines all my life, or it defines, like, it freezes me forever in that state. Like, okay, so that's you, like that's your image or something. No, that's part of me, part of my life, part of my experience. However, there's other experience, the thoughts.
This is just a series of experiences. So why would we define ourselves by ones that were particularly negative or upsetting? Why do we make that choice? And that's what I was talking about earlier. We're so good at taking even the most beautiful moment. So the thing that I do want to mention, because when people are listening, everyone is a yoga instructor. So not only do we practice, we teach. And so what I'm going to say now is I teach how to teach. So I train teachers as well. And I have seen over the years, endless times, people will teach a class or a portion of a class while they're in training. It will be almost perfect. And they will make one error, one mistake. They'll mix up their right and their left, or they'll forget to do one side. And we're talking about brand new to teaching. And by the way, no one will ever teach a class and not make a mistake. It doesn't happen. Okay? Because we're human beings and we make mistakes. Sometimes you're the only one that knows what the mistake was, but that's part of being honest with yourself, right? And telling the truth. So I have never taught a class ever some sort of a mistake. But the person teaching in the training will focus on that mistake. They will throw everything out the window that they did that was awesome and focus on that one thing that went wrong. Or that one person in the class that, deep sighed or said, that could have been better. They'll focus. There'll be 35 people in a class. One person will say something negative, who's a jerk, because would you do that? No. So there you go. Then just going to put it out there. And yet, that's the person we focus on. Right? We focus on that. Let's talk about that. What is that?
It's super interesting. I saw a stat one time. And it was actually from a global world famous yoga instructor, and I can't remember the exact stat, because she said it in one of her classes one time online, that they've done research, and in a day we have like tens of thousands of thoughts, of positive thoughts, and of all your thoughts in a day, like this itty bitty fraction is negative, but our brain fixates on that little tiny sliver and completely forget about all the amazing things of the day. This is a great question. I'm curious, why is that? Like, why do we do that? Why do we focus on that? I mean, I do it. Everybody's guilty of it, right? Like, why do we do that?
Oh, yeah, totally.
So it's not just how we were brought up, I guess.
Well, it's a human condition, because you have to consider that although we were conditioned in some ways, right? Everyone was. So where did it, originate, right? It's the human condition. And this is in the Yoga Sutras. The first thing that it says is that we will take ourselves for the consciousness that we mistake for who we truly are. So we'll mistake in what we kind of see and think about as who we really are, instead of who we deep down are, which is pure reality. And so the churning of the mind is what kind of eats us alive. And so when the mind turns and turns and turns and runs around haphazardly, human nature is to gravitate towards powerful emotions. And powerful emotions, a lot of the time, are extremely negative. Well, anger feels like you're doing something. Jealousy makes you feel satiated. We could go through the list of all of the negative things, and then it's low-hanging fruit. It's stuff that's easy to grab hold of, and it is easier to, for instance, gossip. You can gossip with people and you start to feel like, I'm a part of something. There's a very big difference between gossiping and belonging. Hanging around with 3 friends talking about another one, especially when we're young, actually feels empowering, but it's a false sense of power. So we gravitate towards that side of things. Snakes bite, yes? Human beings gravitate towards negative thinking. It's not our fault. It's just how we are.
Yeah. I appreciate, learning at this stage how to recognize when I am thinking negatively, and then just focusing inward and trying to settle my thoughts down, bring it down to a more peaceful level. And then, I think just like we do on the mat, look for the modification, right? So sometimes we need a block, or sometimes, we can stretch further certain days than others, but looking into our thoughts that way as well, and seeing how we can modify things and look at things from a different perspective, right? From somebody else's lens, or just maybe look for different outcomes.
I totally agree. This self-monitoring that you're talking about of the thoughts is vital, because otherwise, what I was just referencing was the thoughts running amok. And so rather than choosing the direction that you want to think in, you end up just going on a ride. And depending on your level of energy, some of us go on really, really wild rides. In order to think beneficial thoughts for ourselves, we have to practice thinking beneficial thoughts for ourselves. So we have to put some things into place that will help us. What are some of the things that you've put into place that help you get back on track and away from the chaos of the turning over of the mind? Because you've all done it.
I write it down. I find that helps me, and it's therapeutic for me to write it down of what's true. And or what's not true, to write that down. And it helps me because I have a hard time. I'm really hard on myself. And which, for, if you're really, a lot of people are hard on themselves, but if you're hard on yourself, you really are focusing on those little tiny slivers of negative things that may happen. And you almost like have blinders to everything else.
I love that you just said that, because in actuality, you start losing your peripheral vision.
You do.
You actually start losing being able to see what's actually going on.
Yeah. So I have to draw my focus to what is true, like what is right and what is positive. And what's helped me is writing. So I'll write that down, especially when that thought arises and it won't go away. So if it's it's a negative thought, and that's not true. That is not true about me. Like, that's something else somebody has said that has creeped into my mind. That is not true. But still, that thought may kind of bubble back up or may creep back in there. And when that happens, I take a moment and I recenter by writing down what is true. And then I also focus on like the gratitude journal that I have, like focusing on the positive. That helps me tremendously, because it takes a lot of effort to focus on the positive sometimes. Just being honest.
It will get easier, but it does in fact get easier, because just like when you practice doing a pose, after you practice it 500 times, your body gets it.
Yes.
Like, I can do this. And you surprise yourself a lot of the time. We doubt that it will work. But then after you've been practicing for a really long time, you can't deny that truth anymore. You're like, I know that so you start a new pose, for example, something that's challenging, something you're going to work towards. You keep doing it. And then you try to tell yourself the old story from when you first started, which was, I'm probably not going to get it, or I'm horrible at this, except you already know from having practiced hundreds of poses, thousands of times at this point, that story you tell yourself is just simply not true. That if you know for a fact that if you practice this pose, you will get it. It will happen. But that's a perfect example of how we revert back to going, no, not this one. No, this is the one that's going to get me. The pose that I'm not going to be able to ever do. Being positive towards yourself doesn't mean that nothing negative is going to happen. But it was happening anyway.
Yes.
Under your control. And I love what Liz said earlier, where she was like, I don't remember your exact words, but you said you were going to be your own light, and you want to see
your own hero.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's, again, if you're, trying to hold a pose and you fall out, you can begin again. You can begin again and just begin again, because sometimes, coffee in the morning makes practice a little wobbly, or, whatever it is that might be getting in your thoughts that day. But always, trying to keep that message of, just being able to begin again. It's not all this or that, right?
Right. And investing in working with yourself all of the time, in every single day, recommitting to yourself. So taking the energy that you would have spent on trying to perform for others or impress others, and using that energy to help yourself get through each of your days better than the day before. Remember at the beginning of the year, I said that was one of my goals this year, that I was to take care of myself better every single day than I did the day before. And there have been days where I don't really like myself. And, accepting who you are, you get to look at the whole picture. And there are aspects of myself that, they're not particularly endearing, to say the least. And so I have to look at those things and say, well, let me take care of you anyway. That has been a very big challenge, to get to that place of acceptance of the whole being. That is a process that I think will continue for quite some time. But what I can feel is that my stomach doesn't constantly turn over. I don't have constant tightness in my chest anymore. Over the years, bit by bit, day by day, minute by minute sometimes, all of this has started to come together. The key is to not leave yourself behind, and include all aspects of yourself. Touch on that just a little bit before we start to kind of wrap it up. But I think it's important that we share with people what the process truly is. The days when you don't like yourself, it's normal.
Yeah, I just, that topic is really, it resonates with me because, I have a long history of bulimia, so like 20 years, right? And 10 of those, I was in remission for some years, and, relapsed a few years ago. So 10 out of 20 years, I was fighting bulimia by myself, like no one knew. So, and that, of course, it changes your perspective of yourself, and, the judgment, like, every single day would be like, okay, am I good today? Am I, all the checkpoints, everything. If one is missing, you fail. Then you can just completely throw yourself out of the window and, try to start over. Yeah.
Really, I think it's that extreme. Do you notice that we're very extreme with our own circumstances a lot of the time? Where we would never say that to someone else. Throw the whole thing out the window.
Yeah, we would never think of it. I would never think of it, because I've been always supportive of, people in trouble or not doing really well. So very forgiving, but not to myself, which is a big mistake. So, exactly. And then in the recent years, I learned to, it's really the key. I mean, it sounds so like everybody's talking about acceptance, present moment, but I learned how to accept myself even on the days, like you said, you don't like yourself. I mean, it's inside and it's there. It's hard to kind of, overcome that. But I learned to appreciate my body. like liking it. Either it's bloated or not bloated. Like I feel happy. But and the funny thing is that I started taking my pulse, and listening and feeling my heartbeat, and that helps a lot. It's like a therapy to me because it shows you how your body works for you, what it does for you. And my body suffered so much throughout the years I've done. I abused my body, in different ways, and it's still there for me, and it still works for me, and looks good and does whatever I ask it to do. so so the acceptance, and especially I started even enjoying the aging process. I know it sounds crazy probably, but I think I'm so behind of accepting myself and loving myself. I enjoy the wrinkles, and every time I laugh, I see this deep, lines. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's changing, but I love it because this is from laughing, from smiling. And so I think that's the key: acceptance. Try to accept every day. Your your stomach. Okay, your bloated stomach. Start with that. You don't like, you hate it, but it's like, okay, it's mine. And it does what it's supposed to do. And and it's human body, and it's changing, and it's beautiful. So that's the key for me: the acceptance.
What's the key for you, Jamila?
Very similar to what Victoria said. Being still, actually, for me, and feeling, which is like Victoria said, is, you said you're feeling your heartbeat. That kind of really touched me because I was like, that is probably something I do too. That's key for me, is being still, and being still to really feel my body, like just feel every little aspect of my body. Whether it's the heartbeat of what I sense, what I see, what I smell, the little pops and the little, it just
going on over there, right?
But all of those little things that make up you, that we often take for granted, but are so special, feeling the heartbeat, that makes me so grateful and helps me focus on positivity. So very similar to Victoria. It's just, for me, it's being still and going in and just being and feeling.
Yeah, feeling is huge, and that probably maybe sounds a little bit funny to folks. Like, what do you mean feeling? Of course you have feelings. I'm talking about letting yourself feel what's actually there. Woo, that gets really, really challenging.
Yes, and it seems so simple. Like, I'm sure someone when someone watches this and listens to this, they're probably thinking, okay, that's weird. I feel all the time. I'm in my body. And I'm like, no, you really don't this took years and years for me to get to that
feeling. And then where did that feeling come from? And can you feel a little bit deeper than that? And then, oh, wait, it's going to get really interesting now. That's the kind of feeling, where you're like, you don't know whether you want to laugh or cry or just, like a deer in headlights, like, what is happening inside of my body and mind? Yeah, no, it's
yes,
interesting to say the least. Vanessa, how do you get in your positive zone?
Oh, I do like the being still, and usually being outside in nature, being still, like meditating outside. Or walking, outside, just kind of being with nature. But I do really also enjoy movement. And so I think that's why the yoga has got a grip on me, because both of those things together, my body craves the movement, but my mind, I think, craves it even more. So I think together, bringing both of those things together in a balanced way is how I think that's yoking those two together.
Liz, how do you get in a positive zone?
I like Vanessa, I like the movement. I love to run. And I love running outside. So I'm grateful that, I live near a beautiful trail. So I'm there pretty often. And being outdoors, I just have so much gratitude for nature. And so that lifts me up. And then just leads to other things to being thankful for. And so that's, how I get to an area of positivity.
And would you say that it's really important to take this time for yourself every single day?
Absolutely.
We need it every day.
And if you can't do it every day, don't beat yourself up because you couldn't get to it, right?
That's true.
I love that you just brought that up, because that is one of the things that we will do, that given human nature. We will take something that is absolutely wonderful and we will add negativity to it. Like, I'm supposed to take time for myself each day. And then you didn't do it that day. So now you're a bad person.
Or I always tell, like, if you cannot do the whole thing, like whatever you planned for yourself, do at least one small thing. Go to bed earlier, or read something for yourself. Just or make a good meal for yourself. Something, even one small thing. Meditate 5-10 minutes. Just take that time, sit quietly. At least something is better than nothing. And then next day you'll have something to build up, like thinking, okay, I haven't missed that day completely. I haven't ignored myself completely. I gave something to myself.
And finding joy with what you can do, just getting outside to walk the dog is great too, because I get to be out there and maybe run into a familiar face or two and just, get some fresh air. That helps.
So I will share that I have done this thing where I looked at my everyday and all of the things that I do. I made a conscious decision to think of them as positive things in my life. So doing the dishes becomes positive because I want to do the dishes, because then I have clean dishes. Right? Not that there has to be a then this happens. It's like I took all the things that are typically looked at as chores or oppressive, and I realized that was the majority of my life, and I think it's kind of the majority of everyone else's too. And I thought, why would all of the wonderful things you actually want in your life, like I have dishes to clean, okay, and the ones that I picked out, like the ones I wanted, so that's not negative. If dishes, laundry, laundry is very relaxing to do the laundry. Cooking, very relaxing. And then I had to your point earlier, Victoria, food and I were not friends. Okay, had issues when I was in my teens, and similar to yours. And then also realized that just in general, talk about a societal norm. I mean, you've been taught your whole life that you're not supposed to eat, except that you have to eat, except that you shouldn't be eating. Okay. So I decided to make a change in my life and have a positive relationship with food where I enjoy my food. The way that I definitely get positive is accepting life for what it is and really looking at it that way. And I work at that every single day. Mostly my work is counteracting the stuff that tries to creep in and not pushing it away, but accepting it and saying, I hear you, little voice that's telling me that all these terrible things, except I recognize that is not what I want to do. That's not my choice. I choose this instead. And you're not even overcoming anything really. You're just making a different decision. You're in that moment and you go, well, this is here and that is here. It's kind of like, okay, we have, peppermint stick ice cream over here, and we have rum raisin over here. Which one are you going to have? And really, it's the one that you want. And even putting it in those terms, they're both ice cream, but let's just say you're allergic to the peppermint. So you're like, you know what? I'm going to go with this one. And I kind of look at it that way. Like, that's not good for me, but this is in this moment. Instead of running away screaming or trying to push it down or pretend that it's not there, I just say, no, I see you. You know, I actually love peppermint stick ice cream, just on a side note. And now I'm
You're craving it.
craving it.
Something positive, yes. That sounds lovely. Ice cream in general sounds lovely.
Yes, it does.
Exactly. So I think we're going to end there. I appreciate everyone staying. Do we have any final thoughts? What could you recommend, having gone through what you have? What would you, on the map and in your lives, what would you recommend for people to start working towards having more positivity in their lives for real?
To start, just don't make any assumption. Don't expect anything from yourself or from your practice. Don't think you have to be up to some standards to even start doing yoga. Just get on a mat or whatever you have at home, and just start practicing just simple asanas and try to feel your body. Just try to feel, how it moves. How do you feel moving? Find the tempo, find your way of practicing. So that's a good way to start. So first of all, non-judgmental, don't judge yourself, and non-attachment, like don't expect anything from the practice, just practice. And again, try to go inward, just focusing on your breath, because it's vital. It's something that we can feel, right? We can feel and we can manipulate, unlike our mind.
Energy. It's exactly right.
Yeah. So that's, first steps towards the positive thinking.
What would you say, Vanessa?
I like what Victoria had to say, and I agree with all of those comments. I do think that, this is not a dress rehearsal. Life is life, right? And you only get one of these, so that I know of right now. So you've got to just embrace the good and the bad, right? You got to have both in your life, but just try to quiet down that loud part that seems to be the negative that's always creeping up. Just, and just go with the flow of what your heart is telling you. Usually it will lead you in the right direction.
Love that. Follow your heart.
Love that.
What do you think, Jamila?
So my takeaway for focusing on the positivity is, I'll actually share an exercise that I did that has also been very helpful for me. Write down positive affirmations for yourself that are true about yourself, and write them down. And I have mine over here, and just every now and then, you don't have to look at it every day. You don't have to set a time to look at it. You don't have to read it, once a week, or even, once a month if you don't want to. But every now and then, just glance at it and kind of read through them. And it's amazing. For me personally, it's amazing how my little mind shifts and my attitude changes when I read through those affirmations. And I actually wrote 108 of them. So for those listening who are either new to yoga, but 108 is a number that you'll find throughout yoga. And I wrote 108 of them at the beginning of the year, and actually did 108 sun salutations and said each affirmation prior to that salutation, sort of as a reset, refocus, re-energize. And for anyone listening, just doesn't have to be 108. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 500, whatever. Just write down some positive affirmations about yourself that are true about yourself.
Right. There's 108 Upanishads. There's many. The numbers are in yoga, and you'll find this in many philosophies. Numbers always they're symbolic a lot of the time, and they are in yoga as well. And so I love that. And the other thing that I love is the randomness that you just said to do things with. One of the keys for positivity, for sure, that I will share is randomness. So I find if I put myself on some sort of crazy strict schedule, I'm going to be in the house every Saturday at 9 a.m. Make sure that this happens every evening at 5 p.m. I'm going to do this. This is on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Okay, so I'll stop, right? So I'm making everybody just listening to it. Some people are probably like, that's a really good idea. That's the way I do it. Is that in a lot of ways causes, I'm not talking about being disorganized. I'm talking about taking a deep breath and recognizing that you're not incapable of getting things done. Just do them whenever.
Take your freedom. Use the freedom of choice.
Right. I'm going to ask Liz just a final thought on.
Yeah, so you know what? We live in an Amazon world, and everything is moving so quickly, and expectations happen quickly, and reactions happen quickly. And so I would just say, for me, it's practicing non-reaction, to just take a minute to assess whatever circumstance is happening, and then choose to react or not react, and what that reaction will be. But taking that moment, that we can take moments for ourselves, and we can look inward, and we can have our own energy rather than reacting to all the energy that's around us all the time.
So I think doing nice things for yourself on a daily basis really helps to reinforce thinking positively about yourself, because you start doing things in a loving way towards yourself. And then there's one other thing that I want to mention, because every single one of us has children, and that doesn't happen every single time when we meet. Some people that, will be on the podcast don't, but there is literally no greater happiness in my life than looking at my son. I mean, I don't know if you all agree, but there is a purpose to loving yourself and feeling good about yourself and really reinforcing that positivity. I think for me, when I had my son, that choice to take good care of myself and love myself became totally at the forefront. Because you can't show somebody love and not love yourself.
Yeah. I agree. I agree completely.
I appreciate you all so much for everything. And I can't wait to do the next one. I think the next one we're going to do is on dreams. So.
Ooh, fun.
Interesting.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Bethany.
Thank you.
This is like, I just love it. I feel like I could talk another hours.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay,
Bye,
thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Namaste.
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 Namaste. Bye.